That's my wife, Katy.
And that's my husband, Josh.
This is Book Club Date. Thank you for joining us. We are currently, as you can see behind me here, reading Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This is part 2 of 4. So if you'd like to go listen to part 1, you can go back, or if you're kind of going along with us as we read it, that's fine too. But before we dive into our book club, our weekly book club, Katy,
Yes.
what else are you reading besides Lessons in Chemistry?
I am still reading that Sweet Tea Witch series.
Okay.
So not much new to report.
That's all right.
Reading-wise.
That's fine. I am still reading The Sword of Kaigan, so not much new to reading-wise.
Yeah. It's like our limited time. I can only handle like 2 books at once. I can only really juggle 2 books at the same time.
I would say that's still very good.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. We did see, if we're kind of expanding a bit, we did see the new Studio Ghibli?
I don't know.
We saw a newer Studio Ghibli film, The Boy and the Heron, right?
In the Heron.
The Boy and the Heron, yeah.
It was enjoyable.
Yeah. This isn't a movie channel, but yeah, if you like definitely unique animation, definitely stands on its own.
It does. If you want a movie channel, let us know.
Okay.
I mean, you're a video producer.
That's
you're
true.
A movie guy.
That's true. But
I am not.
But I like the books because they're like a step away from that. I can kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not constantly doing one thing all the time. Anyway, I appreciate that though. So maybe, who knows? So that's what else we're reading. Not much has changed there.
I mean, and for this one, they did make it into an Apple Plus show, so...
They did turn into an Apple Plus show.
I do think it'd be interesting to watch that afterwards.
I think so too.
Yeah.
That stars what?
If you guys
want to
see
right?
our... Yeah. If you want to know our opinion on the show, let us know.
All right. Well, just a quick recap on the synopsis of this book. Katy.
Yes, it is the 1950s. We are following Elizabeth Zott's story. She dreams of being a scientist, which is a challenged dream by society that believes that women belong only in the domestic sphere, and she accepts a job on a TV cooking show and sets out to teach a nation of housewives more than just recipes.
Ooh, it still gives me goosebumps, even though I've read it a few times. Okay, so you guys know the synopsis if you watched part 1, so you get it. But that was just for people who may just be chiming in or something.
Yeah.
This is your official spoiler and speculation warning. So we are going to be talking about covering everything in this book, and including to chapters 1 through 23, as well as speculating what we think might happen in the future. And if we turn out to be right, then I guess you could constitute that as a spoiler. So you've been warned. Go away if you don't want spoilers. But add us to your watch list first. Yeah. You're always welcome, but if you don't want spoilers,
you've been warned.
Yeah,
you've
been warned.
Will be spoilers.
The next book club will cover up to and include chapter 32. So right now we're going to talk about chapters 1 through 23, and then we will read up to chapter 32.
Nice.
For our episode for next week. That would be part 3 of 4. So anyway, getting into it, Katy.
Yes.
I'm going to put a clock right here.
Oh, dear.
All right. And I'm going to do that with the magic of editing. And and I'm going to set it for 2 minutes. And we're going to try to summarize a rundown of what all happened in the book. So I'm going to do a brief summary real quick of what happened, and then we're going to start the clock when Katy starts talking. So part 1, the initial synopsis and summary was, at least the abbreviated version, was that we were introduced to our main characters, Elizabeth Zott and Calvin Evans, and a few other minor characters. But Elizabeth and Calvin, they're chemists. They work at the same research facility. Their romance and relationship blooms and their love grows. Off the bat, we are very aware that Elizabeth is constantly having to overcome obstacles professionally and socially solely because she is a woman. It's a huge double standard. We get that. They eventually adopt the dog they named 630. Just as Calvin and Elizabeth, I'd say, are kind of hitting a groove, we kind of get sprung into Act 2 with Calvin dying. He is going for a jog. He slips on some oil and he gets run over by a police car of all things. That's the abbreviated version, and that's where we kind of ended part 1's reading. So very sad. very harsh, but it was a good stretch of establishing these characters, and specifically Elizabeth. We learned a lot about her. So
We did.
with all that said, hon, let's continue our summary of what we've read this week.
Okay. And the
And
clock starts
now.
Okay, so we're starting off with all of the fallout from Calvin's death. Obviously, Elizabeth is mourning his loss. We see the funeral. We've got her in shock and the realization then that she is actually pregnant. So she ends up getting fired for being pregnant, which is incredibly unfair. And Donati and Frask are just horrible about it. Elizabeth goes home. She renos her kitchen and creates a lab in its place where she can also cook. She starts to consult her former colleagues who need her help because they are just not as good at it as her. She ends up charging for that because girl's got to make some money. She's got a baby on the way. 6:30 is almost killed in the cemetery where he goes to visit Calvin's grave on the regular, but the groundskeeper is a cranky pants and threatens with a gun. Instead of getting shot, 6:30 actually barks. The man falls. He starts bleeding from his head. 6:30, remembering the trauma of seeing Calvin die, helps him and saves his life, barking to get the attention of some other visitors to the cemetery. A local reporter spins it so that 6:30 comes across as a hero. We were nervous that they would spin it the other way. Elizabeth goes to Dr. Mason, one of the other rowers, goes to his medical practice to finally get some prenatal care. He thinks at 100 miles per hour, doesn't really know when to stop talking, but he is quick to apologize. He's actually the first person who shows some understanding and sympathy for Elizabeth and her whole situation, not just the pregnancy, but also losing Calvin. Elizabeth has the baby, and we see the struggles of her entering single motherhood.
And I'm going to pick it up. So a person who sees Elizabeth struggling is actually her neighbor across the street, Harriet Sloan, who I just want to have coffee with and have her tell me everything I'm doing wrong with my life. She sounds amazing. But anyway, Harriet Sloan introduced, yeah, I know. Harriet Sloan introduces herself to Zot. She's clearly a capable, more maternal figure. She offers help to Elizabeth with Madeline, as is Elizabeth's daughter's name. We do learn that Elizabeth's daughter's name is not Madeline, but actually Mad Zot. There's a pretty funny story to that, which I think we might get into later. Elizabeth finally breaks down. She does call Harriet for help, and they develop a pretty good rapport and relationship. A year passes. Dr. Mason stops by to visit, kind of give a house visit to Zot, and tries to convince her to try rowing again, specifically with his crew. Harriet Sloan agrees to watch the baby during early morning rowing sessions. Zot takes a job at Hastings again, the research facility. Madeline enrolls in kindergarten thanks to Elizabeth forging her birth year. But really the credit goes to Madeline because she's exceptionally bright and she's able to kind of fool most people. Hastings needs, it's also alluded to that she's kind of tall, but anyway.
Yeah, she's big for her age.
Yeah, Hastings needs Zot to research for some fat cat investor for abogenesis. Zot is back at Hastings. Her boss says that she's a lab tech, even though whenever they asked her to come back, he said he'd reinstate her as a chemist, or heavily implied that. In frustration, Zot runs to the bathroom, runs into Frask, the lady who kind of colluded to get rid of Zot.
The mean lady from personnel.
The mean lady from personnel who played a role in getting Zot fired initially.
Spread the rumor of her pregnancy.
Yeah, spread the rumor of her pregnancy. They have it out. They realize they were both sexually assaulted in college. They bond over that, which is a sad thing to bond over, but at least they find common ground. And Zot finds out that Hastings actually needs her more than she needs them. I'm a little confused as to, we'll get into something about that here in a minute. But Frask is fired. But before she leaves, she takes Elizabeth down to the basement where Hastings was storing Evans's work, and they were holding it. So Elizabeth takes all of Calvin's work. That's who we're talking about there. Donati steals Elizabeth's work and publishes it as his own. I kind of jumped there, but Donati basically, the only reason why he wanted Elizabeth back so that way he could collude to take her research notes and publish his own paper and basically satisfy that fat cat investor that I alluded to earlier. Zot discovers a bit more about Calvin after looking through the material that she took from Hastings. An interesting thing was she saw that he had a minister pen pal, which is very intriguing and interesting, and we, of course, will talk about that more. Madeline is clearly too bright for school and finds it boring. Needing money, Walter Pine, the producer, calls Elizabeth Zott. We met Walter Pine probably in like the first scene or two, like the first chapter or two of this whole book, and he finally comes back in because we finally come full circle almost. And he effectively offers Elizabeth the hosting job of a television cooking show. Walter's just basically desperate. He needs to fill it for advertisers, but there is some sort of X factor that he and many other people up to this point have noticed about Elizabeth. So this is where we're kind of launching into Elizabeth becoming a more science-oriented Julia Child. Time, I think we went way over, but that's okay. That's okay. We tried. Maybe we can make it 3 minutes because it's tough.
It might have been like 5.
Ooh, my bad. I thought we were pretty good though. I feel like if you read the book, you would know what we were talking about. We were just kind of just re-summarizing it in case it'd been a few days since you read a chapter or two.
That's true. Yeah.
So anyway, now we're going to move on to the fun part, meat and potatoes, general discussion questions.
Yeah.
Katie, fire away.
Oh, so what are your thoughts of Elizabeth Zott as a mother?
So what are our thoughts of Elizabeth Zott as a mother? I think she is a great mother, but initially probably a mediocre parent. If you know what I'm saying. Like she, and you know, when you're a parent, you're kind of trying to make it up as best you can, and not make it up, but just trying to do the best you can. So I have a lot of sympathy for like a single mom like her.
Yeah, and especially at that time, like, was clearly not easy. There were a lot of implications, and once people found out she was a single mom or single expecting mom, they would be incredibly rude and offer unsolicited advice, which frankly people are going to do regardless of your situation.
True.
They're going to give you their advice. Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that each child needs a little bit different of parenting, right? Like we don't all have the same personalities from the get-go. So our needs are all, like, as babies, we're all slightly different, and I think Elizabeth is the right mom for her daughter.
Correct.
I really couple thoughts. I did think it was cute how we got more of 630's point of view.
Yes.
And that he was like doing his best to like
protect the creature
and communicate with the creature, which is what he called the baby. They weren't sure because remember, Elizabeth didn't have much she didn't go to the doctor, so she didn't really have much prenatal care as far as we understand. And so 630 just referred to the baby as the creature,
which is hilarious.
Funny.
I also love too how Elizabeth has the baby. She comes home, and she comes home early primarily because she's worried about 630. She's like, no one's fed my dog. I need to get home.
Well, she doesn't have a support system.
Correct. Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. So which is incredibly scary. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, she goes home and she looks at her watch. She goes, "Oh my goodness, you haven't eaten in 24 hours. It's 9:22." And 6:30, and like his own internal monologue is like, "Yes, that's the creature's name. Hello, my name's 6:30. Yours must be 9:22." And then it ends with like, and then the creature wailed and everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Because it was a very rude awakening. And
it was nice that we didn't get just Elizabeth's perspective on now there's a baby. It was also 630's.
Yeah. And
okay, here creature's here now.
Yeah. And Harriet's as well. Like she noticed a lot.
We're introduced to her.
Yeah, and I really like Harriet.
Oh, she was great. Yeah, I enjoyed that, her introduction.
Yeah, she just wants to be useful and helpful to someone. Like
she
clearly she can't even get that from like her husband, who's
barely aware of her existence.
Yeah, like basically, which like sounds awful, right? Like sounds just terrible. But what was the line? Ugly people don't know that they're ugly or something like that, or stupid people don't know that they're stupid.
Don't know that they're stupid.
Something like that.
Ugly people should know that they're ugly because of mirrors.
That's right. That's a good one. But yeah, I mean,
But I think we knew that she was, like, as far as mothering, that she was going to do well because we already saw her kind of mothering 630 as she was teaching him words,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
kind of keeping track of that
Right.
and reading to him.
Right.
Reading is incredibly important for development.
It's true.
So,
It's true. Yeah. No, I think overall, I think she's a terrific mother, and given her circumstances, and more importantly, the time that she's in.
I mean, and she was willing to put her pride aside to go back to Hastings.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which is, how they treated her is like,
oh, it was awful. It was
my
awful.
goodness.
Like, I can't
Yeah.
even imagine.
Well, like, and this is where like I come from, like, not just the time I live in, but just also like just the masculine standpoint. It's like, well, I wouldn't do that, but it's just like, well, the time and the fact that she's a woman,
Right.
she doesn't get that option.
She hadn't
Josh,
been able
right?
to complete her PhD,
Mhm.
and they had made it clear when they fired her that getting references would be an issue. So, like, it would be, if she was able to find something else, it would have been someone kind of taking a blind chance on her.
Right. So obviously her whole experience of getting fired and everything, kind of going into our next discussion question here.
I did think it was interesting that they gave kind of the Hastings company perspective.
What do you mean?
She gave, like, their point of view, like the company's point of view, right? It was like the management's point of view for Hastings Institute.
I don't recall that. Do you mean just like they were like,
it was like they were going over, like, how they had a bit of a conundrum on their hands because on the one hand they didn't want her there because she was a woman,
right?
and on the other hand,
talented, yeah,
she's like the only standout innovator that they've got currently.
It's like trailblazers versus like the common worker bee, right?
Yeah,
She was
they've
one
got
of the
plenty.
trailblazers,
Yeah, and part of her being a trailblazer or an innovator is that she would kind of like challenge the status quo. She refused to make coffee, which annoyed a lot of the men. She would question things. She wanted to be treated as a scientist first. She wanted that to be, how she was treated, to be led by that rather than her gender.
Yeah, I mean, even so at some point toward the end, I can't remember, at least at this reading, she's not a woman chemist or whatever, or a woman scientist. She's a chemist. That's how she views herself, which is right,
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's even if this happened today, like it's still there. Like I'm in the workforce. I work in a very dominantly male area, and a lot of that is because there's lifting to it, right? There's typical masculine type of roles to it. But there are some women who take to it and like to do it. But there is like, it's there, right? Like the dismissiveness, which is just unfortunate because
and
you're kind of just riding off like Elizabeth even said, like half the population is being wasted. I think she says that in part 1 of our reading at some point.
And it's, instead of recognizing that they're capable of more than making coffee.
Absolutely. I mean, they're capable of more than men generally. They can, I mean, women can have children, right? So, and that's pretty impressive. Let's see here.
But and I thought it was interesting how she called them out for, like, when she was getting fired, she was like, you're firing me for this. What would have happened to Calvin? Like, would he be treated this way? And they even acknowledged, no, he would be fine.
Right. But their excuse was Calvin. So at the core of it, it's they would admit it's because Calvin is a man, but their surface level excuse is like, well, Calvin's the exception because he's the genius. Whereas like Elizabeth,
he's the genius who's getting the funding.
Well, I found it interesting because Harriet even said that when she first saw Elizabeth and Calvin together, her first impression was like, Calvin's obviously with her because of her looks. Right. And then once she had a second or third impression, basically.
Yeah, when she saw them interact.
She really saw that they were just like-minded souls, that they were effectively just twins. So, I mean, if you're to take that at face value, that means that Elizabeth, and frankly, from what we've seen, is just as smart as Calvin. The only difference is that she's a woman. They both had
Right,
similar
and
obstacles.
therefore didn't have the same
Yeah.
opportunities, but they
Yep.
both had some rough childhoods.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think they both have similar obstacles in the sense that from their childhoods, they have no support system, period, end of story,
Yeah.
right? Like Calvin maybe with his dad, but who even knows if that's true, because that was just some
Right.
like petty priest that was just, anyway.
Now, I don't remember if I mentioned it in the first episode, but I suspect that the fat cat investor is his dad.
Likely.
Mm-hmm.
Likely. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, that's some good speculation. What is there anything in particular that makes you say that?
Oh, just the kind of secretive nature of the donation. Like, I had already
Yeah.
kind of thought that. And then for him to also, I think it was in this week's reading where they talked about how when he made the investment, he said, he basically wouldn't check in on them for like a year or so because he knows that scientific research takes time.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you need time and space to do like this research that I expect.
It's interesting though, because like,
And they had said, like, part of in Calvin's backstory was that the dad was more science-minded as well. And remember,
that.
he made
Okay.
that donation to the orphanage and wanted all the science and math books brought in. The priest wasn't happy about it.
Right. Because
Mhm.
a lot of science does fly in the face of theological teaching
Mhm.
at times.
Yeah.
There's often times it aligns, but there's also as many times that it doesn't. So
Right. And some of what was in those specific textbooks was not approved by the
right.
priest or the bishop that were overseeing the school.
Right. So speaking of Calvin, he's a rower.
Yeah.
And that kind of is how we get into rowing with Elizabeth, right? We read along with her, so we kind of get into rowing, and we kind of learn some of the nomenclature about rowing and all of that. And
Yeah.
now Dr. Mason has kind of brought Elizabeth back into rowing.
Yeah.
She also was
But I
urging.
think it's also kind of a way for him to keep an eye on her.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Like,
I think he's a good guy. I don't think there's any ulterior motives.
yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think that is a way for him to keep an eye on her.
And I think from like a medical perspective, I'm sure he was interested in how smoothly her pregnancy seemed to go.
Mm-hmm.
In part, probably because she was doing the erging, the rowing practice.
Right. Yeah. Effectively like the rowing machine.
Yeah,
is what
because
she was
a
doing.
lot of times, and even now, there's advice when women get pregnant to take it easy or easier.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want to ramp up your exercise regimen necessarily without doctor supervision. But
I've heard the default generally is to keep it consistent, like wherever you were at before pregnancy is where you should
that's
strive to
your
keep it
peak.
for as long as you can, and then when you feel you need to tailor it back,
Right.
you tailor it back.
But she kind of,
She increased it
yeah.
because she was mourning. That was how she.
Yeah.
I mean, and she even said too, like, I mean, it's, kind of going back to our first question, thoughts on Elizabeth Zott as a mother. She didn't want to be a mother,
Right.
right? Like, she did not want it. She made it clear to Calvin,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of the reason why, in combination of Calvin dying and kind of leaving her hanging,
Yeah.
she was also mad at him because.
So I also wondered when she went to Dr. Mason's.
Dr. Mason's, yep.
When she went to Dr. Mason's and he referred to her as Mrs. Evans and stuff, I almost wondered if he was trying to help her save face in front of the secretary.
Oh, like
If he was trying to just
knew.
kind of like I thought he knew. So
Yeah.
I wondered if he was just trying to kind of like make it clear, like, we do not treat her any less.
Right.
Maybe.
Maybe he's also just so absent-minded though, clearly. Like
I mean, he might not have.
Yeah, he'll just like say something, be like, "Ooh, yeah, sorry, Calvin is dead, isn't he? My bad. Okay, anyway." Like it's kind
Yeah.
of what he does. You know, but he is always quick to apologize,
Yeah.
as you mentioned.
And I did like that when he went to visit her, like he just automatically started cleaning. He's like talking to her. She's got a new baby. She's exhausted. And he just comes in and starts talking like, now I want you to come, you need to come back and row with us. And he's
Yeah.
like, oh, where's the sponge? Like, and he just
Yeah.
starts doing dishes. And
Yeah, well, he knows that she needs help, and he knows that it's chaotic, and
yeah, but I thought it was sweet.
yeah,
I
mean,
did,
yeah, he seems like a pretty genuine guy.
like similar with her neighbor who just comes in and is like, oh,
Yeah,
do you need me to get the baby? I'm going to go get the baby.
Yeah, and rowing is such a
You need help. You need coffee. Let's get you some coffee.
like Harriet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Harriet,
and then Elizabeth brews the coffee in like the chemist way,
yeah.
which I've and side note, in Breaking Bad they do something similar to that.
Oh,
And then
do
Walter
they?
White, the main character, like he drinks the coffee just because you've never seen it.
Yeah.
But Walter White drinks the coffee, he goes, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And then like the guy's going through like his process for how he brews it and everything. And it's like, as I was reading that, I was like, that's just like the Breaking Bad scene
Oh, okay.
and everything. Cause like Harriet's like, it seems like, what does she say? Like this coming from a woman who put 20 steps into making
Who
coffee.
added like 12 extra steps to making coffee.
Yeah. But then she drinks it and then she never questions it again because
Yeah.
it's that good.
Yeah.
Because like,
Well, it seemed like it almost got steeped, like was slowly steeped like tea.
yeah,
And then it went back.
but like,
the water.
but like accelerated almost because it like transfers back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not chemists.
No.
We could have been, but we decided to do book club day instead for you guys,
All for you.
for the listeners and viewers. All right. Okay. Anyway.
I did enjoy my chemistry class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
My
rowing.
teacher had us call him by his first name, and the office people hated that. It was so funny. What
was his name?
Barry.
Barry.
Yeah.
Barry. Sorry. Anyway. So anyway, our next question. Rowing is clearly a big part of the book. Is it a metaphor for something? What do you think? Or is it just like a good kind of like constant reminder of Calvin or what do you think?
Perhaps. Now, I had read that the author rows, like that she's a rower.
Okay.
So I think in part, and I had also read that
The author, Bonnie Garmus.
Bonnie Garmus,
Bonnie Garmus, right.
and that she had edited or oversaw like publications of scientific papers or something like that. So I think it's adds in an interest that she already has and already knows a lot about.
Right.
So I'm sure she's got some messages and realizations that rowing has allowed her.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting seeing how like that physical activity can help you in dealing with loss.
Right.
It gives you something that it's almost the way she was doing the erging, it's almost like meditative,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she was doing like 10,000 meters, which we have a water rower from Water Rower Club ourselves. And we've done, I think even whenever I was at peak using it, I think I was hitting like 5,000 meters. Like going.
I usually measure it by minutes.
Oh, well, that's good. But I mean,
not so much distance, more the time that I could keep going.
I mean, it's a full body workout.
It
It can
is.
wear
It
you
really
out.
is.
So I mean, like
It'll
not
keep you in shape.
Yeah, we're like not ignorant to like the physical.
And
demands
I'm
of it.
sure on the actual water.
Oh, yeah.
With a team, it's got to be
Way different and more difficult. So
But also was it Dr. Mason who talked about how with rowing, or maybe it was just a line that she included about how rowing, you're not facing where you're going. You're always looking behind at where you've been,
right, but you're still moving forward.
but you're still moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is also, there's also a line in the book about basically Bonnie heading off this type of discussion question, where Elizabeth, I think it's Elizabeth. She's talking about how this one commentator, how this reader speculates on it
Madame
this way.
Bovary.
Yeah, and then this reader speculates that way, but no one cares what the author actually intended.
Yeah.
Like, which is kind of funny, because like who, I think it's safe to say that it is a metaphor. I think it's a good metaphor in this book because you can take it many different ways.
I think you can take it many different ways.
So, and
even if it was just included for funsies.
yeah, like that kind of comment from Elizabeth was kind of her winking at like the reader. Just like, I know you're gonna comment about.
No, and I totally understood. I'm pretty sure that was a question that we had to respond to in high school when we read Madame Bovary.
But you didn't like Madame Bovary.
I did not.
Did not. Didn't your teacher say forewarning?
Yeah, so we had summer reading for the particular class I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to read 3 books over the summer and then pull out passages for each of them and then write our impressions and what those, like the significance of those passages. And that was like to prove that we had read these books and whatnot. But yeah, we sat down for a meeting before the end of the school year, the year before, and the teacher that we were going to have the following year was like, okay, and you will hate this main character. You will not like her. Sorry, you're going to have to read it still. Like, it's part of the curriculum.
Brutal.
And then, so we had to.
That's that fine-tuned education system at work there.
Yeah.
Okay, so... all right, so the whole scene with the graveyard keeper was 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
How relieved were you that 6:30 did not die?
Oh my God, I don't think I could have handled that right now.
Oh, I would have been. Yeah. So
like might have had to stop reading. Period.
Yeah. So our beloved fur baby, our dog, passed recently.
One of our dogs.
Yeah, and it kind of hit us hard. So that one I was like,
it was
oh my
very
gosh.
sudden.
Yeah.
It was sudden and unexpected, and it was just, she was there and then she wasn't.
Yeah, and not a fun experience for anyone.
No.
Anyway.
Like, even the vets were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was 6:30 is just awesome.
Yeah.
He barks at the groundskeeper, frightens him, and then he saves the groundskeeper. And I'm so happy that reporter was like, wait a minute, you're that dog. And then he's like posing him, and I'm like, why is he posing him in such dramatic hero shot poses? And then like the next paragraph is like,
I thought it was gonna go there.
Is like,
yeah.
Well, like once I realized what he was doing, I was like, okay, I think he's gonna do a story that's gonna paint the dog in a positive light.
Yeah.
And I think he did so.
Yeah.
Specifically because of he probably needed a good story, number one, because I think it's a better story than like aggressive dog is put down, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a better story, number one. But I also like to think maybe he did it because he knew the last thing that woman needs is to lose her dog, right?
Yeah.
Like I think he knew that, so I think that's why he spun it that way. And then there were a bunch of complaints.
There were tons of complaints about the groundskeeper like shooting at squirrels and birds in the middle of funerals and stuff. And we also know that the journalist was basically on the obituary beat.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was what he covered, and so he was probably familiar with that as well.
Right.
With all of the complaints.
Right. But how? Let's say Calvin didn't die.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth still has the baby and all that.
Yeah.
What do you think's different? Do you think they get married? Do you think they don't? Do you think she even has the baby? Do you think?
Oh, she would have had the baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What makes you say that? Do you think she was urging so much? Because she even admits that her urging
admits she was basically hoping for a miscarriage.
Yeah, that like the urging was like a half-hearted effort to miscarry, basically.
Yeah. Opposite effect.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, like Dr. Mason's like, yeah, your baby's really strong. She's like, damn it.
Yeah, gonna be a great rower.
It's like, oh, okay.
Those hands, perfect for calluses.
Yeah. But so you think...
Well, one of the lines, too, was that basically terminating a pregnancy was not acceptable.
Right.
Being a single mom was not acceptable, but
Terminating
a pregnancy was also not acceptable. So it was a lose-lose situation for any woman in that position at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
But she got Madeline at the end.
She did.
So that's cool. Yeah, I think if Calvin's alive, everything's better.
Yeah, I mean, he might push for the marriage
100%.
more.
Yeah.
And then there would be a discussion over whose last name does the baby get.
Right. No, it would have made it for its own interesting kind of alternate story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it would have been more about like instead of.
But also then she wouldn't have been fired from Hastings.
No.
Because if she had, Calvin would have left.
Correct.
And if Calvin left, there goes
a
bunch of their funding.
She probably would have. Well, because Calvin was, you know.
He was the superstar.
He was, and he was frankly making clearly enough to afford a pretty comfortable lifestyle. So they absolutely could have afforded like a nanny or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then Elizabeth
I
would
mean,
have kept working.
he might have ended up taking a job elsewhere.
True.
Just because we find out that he actually had offers. Once Elizabeth does finally get his things and his boxes and research that were being kept in storage at Hastings, she's going through his belongings and finds out that he actually had a ton of offers. And she realizes that Hastings lowballed him, like way lowballed him. And the whole reason he took that position was because of the proximity to a rowing club and the weather.
Right.
So I think if she could have helped him find a position, or if they could have together found a place that would accept both of them, or a location where they could both find work in what they wanted to do. But it sounded like he wanted to work with her on the abiogenesis, which, by the way...
Yeah, I mean, he found it fascinating. That's kind of what, not just her looks, but that's what, the initial infatuation was, like her looks and the fact that she didn't really take his shit, basically.
Oh, yeah, she did not.
Yeah, that was the initial kind of trigger to the infatuation. But what maintained his interest was because she was smart, and specifically abiogenesis.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
What do you got there?
Abiogenesis is basically the idea that the first life forms were simple and then gradually became more and more complex.
Right. It's like I thought I read that it would basically.
Couldn't remember if we had covered that or not, so I wanted like a nice.
Right.
Little...
Good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. I thought that I read that basically abiogenesis would, like concretely reinforce basically Darwinism, essentially, like evolutionary theory, right? That went from single cell and then developed.
Yeah.
And it would lend credence to that theory even more so. So, so we got one more here.
Oh yeah, this is my question. Do you think that 630 and Elizabeth, because there's a whole section about her teaching him words, and we get updates about how many words he has learned. And
it's like 500 something.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, have you guys seen, because you already told me you haven't, but have you guys seen those talking animal buttons? It's like little buttons, right? Like the Staples Easy button that they can click, and it's tied to words, right? So the dog can click a button and it says food, or they can click a button and it says walk, or they can click a button and it says outside, or mom or dad, or whomever.
Oh,
like the talking buttons. Yeah.
Okay.
That people get. And if you guys haven't seen this, look it up. They've got there are some people who have used them with their cats and some who've used them with their dogs.
Yeah, the cats it's like nothing that we don't know, but man, they're moody, and you give them words now to like verbalize their feelings, and you're just like, oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
so basically you can teach an animal like say like 30 odd words, maybe somewhere between 10 to 30 depending on how smart they are. And you can
Right.
teach them like food, outside, mom, dad, and they can go and touch the button and they eventually
I love
learn
you.
it. Yeah, like I love you, and they eventually learn.
And you can just keep adding on.
Yeah.
You can keep adding on words.
I mean, maybe one day. Okay, so
Anyway, I think Elizabeth would have gotten a kick out of those.
I think Elizabeth would have 100% gotten
She
one.
would have covered the house in them.
Yeah, she would have gotten one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think it's really cute how 6:30 goes and picks up Madeline from school.
Oh my gosh, so adorable.
Like just 6:30, protecting the creature.
Yeah.
What is it like at one point? Like Madeline's like, I don't like school, and creatures, and then like 6:30's like, well, that's it. I don't like school
either.
The creature doesn't like school. She's not going anymore. That settles it. It's like it's such like a funny little dog
if
way to
she
think
doesn't
about
like
it.
school, then I don't like school.
Basically, yeah. I mean, he's man's best friend, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, I enjoyed kind of our opening into Act 2, and like we said, this one ends on effectively. It looks like we're about to roll into Elizabeth hosting her show and that taking off and that being its own obstacle, and that's going to have its own kind of issues and developments and all sorts of fun things that clearly are going to happen.
And we also finally got some clarity over why, the other girl, I think it's Amanda, why her lunches are so weird, and why Madeline is like, no, you don't understand. Her lunches are unusual.
Right.
I think they kept saying unusual or abnormal, and it's not just that it's like weird food combinations. It's that like her dad, because he's a single dad.
Yeah.
And he's packing her like a stapler.
Yeah, because he's
for lunch and stuff.
Yeah.
He's just not quite with it.
Yeah, I'm not saying being a TV producer is the toughest job, but I've seen the hours that have to go into it.
Yeah.
And especially back then when TV ad was probably at like an all-time high and the stakes were extremely high and the competition was fierce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can 100% just from my experience in that field, just how absent-minded you can become. Probably he's also naturally absent-minded too, but you know, I mean.
Well, and his wife left him.
Right.
And then it said there was a messy divorce and she took everything.
Yeah, and that can just completely, I mean, it's one of the hardest things to happen to a family is a divorce, like hands down. So, doesn't shock me. One thing that I wanted to come back to real quick was we mentioned it whenever we were doing our kind of rundown, was Elizabeth, you know, like whenever she's talking with Frask in the bathroom, it's heavily implied, and it's also kind of communicated that Elizabeth doesn't pick up everything that's put down in front of her if it's not related to science. So maybe she was just completely oblivious and just missed this entirely. But I thought she realized after that conversation with Frask that the fat cat investor wanted her, or like wanted the scientist Zot to be working on abigenesis, and that's why they brought her back. That's why Hastings brought her back. Like, I thought that was pretty clearly communicated in the bathroom between Frask and Elizabeth. And then I was even more confused that Elizabeth didn't use that as leverage. Did she just miss it, or am I misinterpreting what happened?
I think because this is before she quit, right?
Correct, yeah.
So it's her second time around at Hastings.
Which is good for her, by the way. That's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you're ever in a toxic job...
a terrible work environment.
Yeah. If you're ever in a toxic environment at work, as soon as you can... Like, I mean, don't just do it because people may rely on you, but as soon as you can, jump.
Get out.
Yeah. Jump.
Get out if you can. Yeah, I mean, because she went back, and then Donati published, like, it was very sneaky too. Like, he took her files basically of the research she had been doing, took her files, copied all of it, and then wrote her paper, or, you know, published her paper with his name on it. I'm not sure how much he actually edited or altered it, but it was her work.
He probably just polished it up.
Maybe. Or had someone else do that.
Yeah. I mean, back then it would be a man's word against a woman's.
Right. And I think that's partly why, like, what was she going to do?
Right. So that's a good point. So maybe she was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And then when that happened.
Yeah, I don't know why she didn't use her name as more leverage, but also, like, Donati lied to the investor and said that Zott didn't do any of the research and turned out to be like
Right.
a has-been washout.
Well, Zott also, she did work with Frask before Frask got fired on trying to find out who this fat cat investor was.
Right, and couldn't find any info.
Right, because Donati has probably kept it pretty close to his chest, which makes sense. I hate.
I don't think
the
investor left his name either. I think he chose anonymity.
Okay, interesting. But Donati's had a conversation with him, though, at least on the phone.
At least on the phone.
Yeah, okay.
They maybe saw him, but again, like I said, I suspect that it's Calvin's dad.
Okay, yeah.
And in which case he would not want any record of his, or he could lie about the name, like.
Right. Well, I mean, we clearly are gonna.
If the funds are coming anonymously, which they could.
Yeah.
Or through some other type of funding.
I think he's going to discover Elizabeth, this fat cat investor. I think he's going to discover Elizabeth via her cooking show, because clearly at the beginning of this whole book, it's alluded that Elizabeth is effectively a national figure whenever we're introduced to her, before we kind of take a step back and reverse and then go forward. Anyway.
And it wouldn't be too hard to put together, Zott, and now you have this woman who's like got a scientific approach to cooking.
Right, and she's clearly going to talk about abagenesis at some point.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think that's going to be at some point like some lesson in her cooking show. So I think that's how he's going to find her, and he's probably going to try and ring her into continuing her work on abagenesis, which is going to be interesting. Anyway, let us know down in the comments what you think is going to happen next, because we're kind of barreling through Act 2 here. So a lot of things are happening, a lot of moving parts, and I'm really enjoying this book so far. I really am.
Yeah, me too.
I was a little hesitant at first, but I'm so glad you picked it, because I actually think it's incredibly well written, and I increasingly like Zott. And I swear to God, if 630 dies, I am just going to lose it.
Unacceptable.
But anyway, we're not going to put that out there. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back. Okay, yeah. So thoughts, comments below. Katie.
Yeah.
Send us off. Oh, actually, before we do that, let's go over our favorite highlights. So these were some highlights that we did through our little Kindles and whatnot, or Katie did on the book too.
Yeah.
So let's just rotate on these, all right? So the first one is, no surprise, idiots make it into every company. They tend to interview well.
And I thought that was funny, because that one has like almost 8,000 highlights.
That one is so good. I didn't even realize that it was highlighted until after. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense.
Like, obviously. You want the next one?
You can.
Oh, you want me to?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How dare you, he said, his voice rising, a woman telling me what pregnancy is. Who do you think you are? She seemed surprised by the question. A woman? She said.
That one made me chuckle a lot. So that was Donati, basically, as he was firing Elizabeth the first time.
For being pregnant.
Our next one here is, not every woman wants to be a mother, he agreed, surprising her. This is Dr. Mason, I believe. Not every woman wants to be a mother, he agreed, surprising her. More to the point, not every woman should be. He grimaced as if thinking of someone in particular. I feel like we've all
been there.
Yeah, like we've all kind of had that mindset where it's like, yeah, probably not the best, but you never know.
This is good. He was named 630 to commemorate the exact time they'd become a family, and now he knew what the creature would be called. Hello, 922.
And that's right before Mad just starts wailing, and it's just like the world comes crashing down.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I like that. Like most stupid people, Mr. Sloan wasn't smart enough to know just how stupid he was. But communicated. Welcome to life on the outside. How's the trip? Please come in. I've got chalk. Oh, sorry. I must have. Oh, I'm sorry. I copy and pasted in the wrong way. Okay, so this highlight is like most people, Mr. Sloan wasn't smart enough to know just how stupid he was. So that's good.
Yeah. The other part is 630, trying to communicate with creature.
Right.
Hello, 922.
Yeah, because he picks up
Welcome
chalk.
to life on the outside. How is the trip? Please come in. I've got chalk.
Yeah, because he saved chalk for
Yeah, this kid outside had thrown their chalk, and so he picked it up for her.
Yeah. He was excited.
For Mad. He picked it up, not for the child who threw it. He picked it up and brought it home. Oh, tired? Busy? Probably going to argue you don't have time. Because I don't. Who does? Being an adult is overrated, don't you think, he said. Just as you solve one problem, 10 more pull up. And that's Dr. Mason to Elizabeth.
Truth. Preach, Dr.
When
Mason.
he's trying to convince her,
to
you've got to row.
Yeah, to come back to
And
rowing.
he's like, oh, the good thing is, no one's busy at 4:30 in the morning.
It's true. No one is.
No one's
Because they're
busy.
sleeping.
Yeah, because they're sleepy. Well, hopefully they're sleeping.
This next one is one can never be too tall, Harriet said. Robert Wadlow died from being too tall, Madeline said, tapping the cover of the Guinness Book of Records. But that was a pituitary gland disorder, Mad, Elizabeth said. 9 feet tall, Madeline emphasized. Poor man, Harriet said. Where does someone like that shop? I can tell you as a 7-foot tall man, Destination XL.
Or king size.
Or king size. There's a lot more than there were like even 10 years ago. There's a lot more options now. There didn't used to be.
Occasionally
I
find some
struggle.
good stuff for you at like Macy's or JCPenney, but
Yeah.
it's difficult. It is tricky.
Yeah. Shameless plug, Katie has a blog on her, or has a post on her blog about buying tall gifts for tall men or something like that, right?
Oh, yeah, gift ideas for tall men.
Yeah, there you go. Shameless plug. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Yeah.
We'll link it below or in the show notes.
Last highlight.
She is, so Zot answers the phone after the producer guy has called the house, trying desperately to get a hold of her. And he's like, oh, thank goodness. I left messages with your housekeeper. I guess she didn't give you the message. And Zot replies, she is not a housekeeper and she did not neglect to give me your messages.
To which his reply is, oh. Just
and then he kind of like goes into what he needs.
It's pretty brutal. But it's great.
A little bit, but I've also like...
He's also being pushy, and she's just like...
A little
dude.
bit. Like you've called like 3 or so times, you know.
Right. All right, Katie, go ahead and send us on out of here.
So our next episode is going to cover up to and including chapter 32. So if you're reading along with us, make sure you read through the end of chapter 32.
Okay, and remember to like, subscribe, and all other stuff, whatever platform you're watching us on. We appreciate it, reviews and everything. Feel free to have some comments and commentary and discussions down below in the comments. We'll join you down there.
Yeah, let us know what you're thinking of the book so far.
Yeah. I mean, if you've been following along, you've clearly read enough.
Who do you think the Fat Cat Investor is?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
We will.
But until next time, that's my wife, Katie.
And that's my husband, Josh.
And this has been Book Club Date. You have a great day.
Bye.